Today, we are diving into a topic that is sure to spark some serious debate. Whether you're just starting out in your financial journey or you're thinking about making a big move, this discussion is going to give you a lot to think about. Stick around because the insights that we're sharing today could change the way that you think about your living situation and your financial future. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror. Where future success is reflected in our knowledge of fixing the one thing we can control, ourselves.
Welcome to the Financial Mirror, and thanks for joining me today as we continue to work to improve the one thing that we can control, ourselves. Here at the Financial Mirror, it is not about the numbers and spreadsheets alone, but about transforming and educating you on money so that you can make smarter financial decisions. If this is the first time you're joining in, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube to be notified of all the new episodes as they release. If you're listening on Rumble, don't forget to follow the channel, like the video, share the video, and on any podcast platform of your choice, share and like the video. Thank you for joining in here today as we are diving into but it is a highly debated topic in personal finance: buying a home versus renting. Buying a home versus renting. And, I've got a slightly controversial take on this, so stick around. I'm sure the comment section will light up when we go over this, but you don't want to miss it. And so hopefully you can sort of, even if you don't completely agree with me, that you can start to just think about things maybe a little more deeply, a little bit differently, in how you approach it. Like I said, you don't have to completely agree with me, but if you take something away, hopefully it'll be that you can kind of look at your own views a little differently. So you probably heard people say everyone should buy a house. Renting is like flushing money down the toilet or just making your landlord richer, right? Like we've all heard these things. Today, I'm going to challenge both of those ideas. While I do believe that, and this is how I'll start this, I do believe that buying a home should be your ultimate goal. There is a time and place for renting that many people overlook. And then they hide it behind the fact of saying, well, you're just making your landlord richer, and you're just going out and throwing money away. You could be investing that into your own home, and rent is just going toward nothing, and your mortgage would be going towards something that you own and is growing in value. I've heard it all. I've got it. I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. It all makes sense. Now, let's talk about my own views about it. So let's talk about the benefits of renting. Let's start there, right? Like before we even get into home buying, let's start with renting, as you should do. Before you ever get into home buying, you should first start out with renting. So what are the true benefits of renting, right? That flushing the money down the toilet type of thing. Like what are the true benefits? Well, let's talk about how renting can actually be a smart financial decision, right? Like it sounds crazy. This is actually a smart financial decision, especially if you have debt or you have not saved up enough money for a down payment or a fully funded emergency fund. So let's start there. If you have debt or you don't have a fully funded emergency fund or down payment saved up, renting can actually be a smart financial decision. Renting provides things like flexibility because you're not tied to a mortgage, and that is crucial if you're working on paying off debt or saving up for your fully funded emergency fund. Now, what do I mean by all this? What do I mean by flexibility? What do I mean by smart financial decision? Well, one of the biggest costs of homeownership is maintenance. Maintenance is one of the biggest costs, and even worse than it being such a large sum of money that goes into that, is also completely unpredictable. So when you rent, maintenance and repairs are typically covered by your landlord, or it is covered by the landlord financially, but maybe you work with a property management company that this actually is where your maintenance requests go in at or whatever, but you're on the back end, your landlord's paying for it. Whoever owns that property, they're paying for their property management company, and just doing something sweet. But I want to give you an example, right? Like, so my wife and I, we once had a furnace breakdown in the middle of winter, right? We had gone to the airport. We were going to fly out that morning, and our flight got delayed, and it was delayed like 6 hours or something. So we were like, we'll just go back home and we'll come back to the airport. When we got back to the house was like 50 degrees. We're like, oh my goodness, it is frigid. It is cold. And all of a sudden, we noticed the pilot light's out. Furnace is broken, right? Furnace will not start back up. It won't hold. The pilot light won't hold. All these things, right? Not a good thing. Not a good thing in the middle of winter. So while I'm on a plane, I'm dealing with HVAC folks to try to get out there and get a new system put in. So all of that's to say that was a $10,000 plus cost to replace. If you are in debt or you are trying to save up money for a fully funded emergency fund or for a down payment, a $10,000 expense is a setback. And when I mean setback, a stressful financial burden, right? Stressful financial burden. So that's a big deal. And when you're thinking about it, and I just want you to think about how much that costs, or what you think about it from a landlord perspective. As a landlord, they normally look at this as something called like a 5X rule, right? So right here, 5X rule typically implies that a landlord is going to estimate that around 1.5 times the monthly rent is what they're going to pay in annual repairs, right? So if you charge, like in this example, $1,200 a month in rent, you should anticipate about $1,800 a year on repairs, right? So that's a big deal. That's a big deal because if as a landlord you are going through and trying to figure out how much you're going to pay for these hidden costs, right? Like if you're trying to figure out how much you're going to pay for maintenance, you can kind of think about that from a renter's perspective as being like, well, that's how much I'm saving, right? I'm saving by not having to pay that because in all honesty, most of your costs are going to be covered by your landlord, right? So just a little bit better way of saving money is by renting, right? You don't have to pay all those crazy costs. But there's additional costs that come with homeownership that most people forget about, right? Most people forget about is that there are hidden costs of homeownership, whether we're looking at things like property tax, whether we're looking at things like HOA fees. HOA fees are going higher and higher as more and more communities are adding amenities, as more and more communities are trying to make their community attractive, right? They want their little subdivision to be the most attractive, right? They want it to be somewhere that people want to live. So what do? They add in amenities. Who pays for that? The homeowners. How do they pay for that? Through HOA or condo fees if you live somewhere where there's condominiums. So all of these things are making costs go up. Homeowners insurance, depending on where you're at, depending on the type of natural disasters that are in your area, that requires different policies. All of these things are additional costs, and then you can get down here to some of the repairs type of things that go on: termites, mold, landscaping and lawn care, whether you pay for someone to do it or you do it yourself. All of these things are additional costs that you are saving by renting. You're going to walk out, you're going to smell the fresh grass, and it's going to smell like money because you didn't pay to do it and you didn't physically have to go out and cut the grass, right? You're just going to walk out and it's going to be a fresh cut lawn every single time. You don't have to think about it. You can focus on the things that matter, like getting out of debt, saving up for a down payment, and saving up for you to have a fully funded emergency fund. So renting has its perks, right? All this that I just talked about are costs that your landlord is paying when you're renting. Landlord's paying it, not you, right? So there's some predictability there. There's some flexibility there. There's some stress-free living there because you just kind of get to live in the facility, right? You kind of just live there and take care of it, but you just live there, right? So renting has its perks, especially if you're just not financially ready yet to buy a home. But let's not dismiss the idea of home ownership just yet. It is important to understand when is the right time to buy, right? I'm not here to tell you that home ownership is something that you shouldn't do. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is a time and place for when you should begin to think about home ownership. Home ownership is something that costs money. We just went over a few of those things, but let's talk about the benefits of owning a home. When done right, home ownership can be a great way to build wealth and just feel like you own a little bit of something, own the place that you live in, and it just feels different. But just owning it, but there's a time and place for it. So let's talk about the benefits of owning a home. And instead of paying each month paying your rent, you're paying into something that is building equity into an asset that can appreciate over time, right? Like, let's talk about that. So the first place I wanted to start when we kind of think about home ownership is talk about that word appreciation, right? Let's talk about appreciation. There's tons of articles out there. There's tons of things out there that talk about appreciation. And I found this one on Bankrate's website, and it kind of just talks about the forecast. This was published in April of 2024, but just forecast the next 5 years. And you can find this all over the place. You can find where people are talking about like the average appreciation of homes and things of that nature. And this article kind of falls in line with what you'll find anywhere else. But most of the time people say, well, your home's going to appreciate about 2 to 3%, right? 2 to 3% is what the average home appreciates. This article kind of talks more of like a 3 to 5%. He doesn't really call out that it is 3 to 5. He just says overall in 5 years, expecting prices to have appreciated a total of 15 to 25%. So in 5 years, 15 would be the 3% to the 25 would be in the 5%. So 3 to 5% is kind of what the expectation is here. But that's pretty standard of what most people would see. Most people are going, when you look around, you're going to see homes appreciating in that range, in that area, that 3 to 5%. Now, that's great, right? Because you're paying a mortgage, you're not paying the rent, right? The rent is technically now a mortgage, and it's going into something that you own and is appreciating, right? Growing in value. It's not like the car that you have parked in your driveway or in your parking space that is depreciating, right? It's growing in value. Now, that is a great thing. It's a great thing that your money, you're paying into something, and it is becoming, as you're paying into it, it is growing in what it's worth. Now, that's a great thing, but that's not the only thing that homeownership provides. It also provides stability and control. Owning a home provides stability. You're not at the mercy of a landlord who could at any time, really, I'm totally honest, they could say, hey, in 6 months, I'm selling this house and you got to find somewhere else to live, right? You could have lived there for 8 years. You could have lived there for 15 years. And they may say, yep, I'm about to sell it and you got to go. It's just a part of it. It is. It's a part of it's a business. If they're not turning a profit, or they're not really doing what they expected, they're going to sell it. And maybe the new owner didn't want to maintain it as a rental. They wanted to live in it themselves. I don't know, but they're going to kick you out. It's just a part of it. But you also, that's kind of the stability part, but you also have some control over the living space, right? If you want to paint the walls, if you want to install a new whatever, like, you can just do it. You own it. It's yours. Go for it, right? Just a little bit of benefit there. And then the other big thing that really comes with it is there's tax benefits with owning a home. There are tax benefits with owning a home. Mortgage interest and property taxes are often deductible from your taxes, and that can save you money at tax time. Now, when I talk about this, I also like to talk about it because I have a video that is also wildly controversial, and I'll put a link to it if you're interested in it. But it talks about one of the reasons is controversial, is that saying, hey, pay off your home, get rid of your mortgage, get rid of the mortgage. Like, most people are gonna, they're upset about that because you say, oh, I can go and invest and gain more. Well, this is another one of those conversations. It's controversial, but people say, well, if you pay off your house, you lose the tax benefits. Tax benefits are not what you expect. So here's an example. This is a little chart that talks about like how much you really save per dollar spent on your mortgage, and it's not that much. So this assumes a $300,000 mortgage, a 30-year loan term, a 6.5% interest rate, 25% federal tax rate, a 7% tax rate, state tax rate, and a 1.2% property tax rate. That's what this comes out to, and it's alarming, actually, slightly alarming. So if what I'm saying here is there are tax benefits in owning a home, but it is not a reason to keep your mortgage around. Okay. Just a quick little glance at this. Total amount paid in mortgage, interest, property tax, and mortgage, right? They kind of just holistically. Total amount paid, kind of just across the board in your taxes and versus your total tax savings. You come out to being 28 cents on every dollar is what you're getting back. 28 cents on every dollar is what you're getting back. That's not that good. That's not that good. That is not a reason that you want to keep your mortgage around. Okay. So it is not a reason to keep a mortgage around. So don't think about it and be like, oh, I'm going to keep my mortgage around because, it's just great. I mean, when you look at it, it's really, like I said, it's slightly alarming, right? It's slightly alarming that you can even be like, man, like I paid so much in property tax. I paid so much in mortgage interest. It's alarming. So anyways, I'm not going to get too caught up in it, but what I'll tell you is this: it's not a reason to keep your house around. Don't keep your house around. Keep your mortgage around. Get that thing paid off, and start enjoying life a little bit. Start enjoying life. So all those are great benefits: the stability, the control, the long-term investment, the appreciation, the tax benefits. All those great reasons to own a home. However, homeownership isn't for everyone at every stage of life. So how do you know when you are ready to buy, right? So I talked about the benefits of renting, and there are benefits to renting, right? We talked about those. We talked about the case for kind of homeownership. Next thing I want to tell you is when do you know? When do you know you're ready to move from renter to homeowner? When is that transition ready to go? Well, first and foremost, you need to be debt-free with a fully funded emergency fund. This means no credit card debt, no car loans, no student loans. You should have an emergency fund worth 3 to 6 months of your typical expenses. And I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes, but it's a really good little nerd wallet, a really good little nerd wallet calculator that just shows, hey, how much is necessary for my emergency fund? And you just go through here, and I just put in some numbers: $1,750 monthly rent, $400 a month in utilities, $100 a month in like telecom stuff like phones and cable and internet, $300 a month in insurance for car, health, home, all those type of things. Most likely your home insurance is going to be rolled into your monthly mortgage. Just saying. Might be your rental, and anyways, if you're in a rental, this would be probably just rent, right? You would only have car and health insurance. Anyways, monthly transportation costs, gas, things of that nature. Monthly grocery expense, other expenses. And you just hit next, and it says, hey, here's how much you need. This is a basic 6 months of living expenses. You need $24,300 with my little example. And I'll put this chart down there because you can put these numbers in for you and just see that's what you need in a fully funded emergency fund. That's what you need in a savings account. That's what you need to be able to say, yep, I'm ready to go. Check. That's marked off the list of my homeownership checklist. I'm good. I'm debt free, and I have a fully funded emergency fund. That's step one. Step two, you need a good down payment. Ideally 20% to avoid PMI, but you need at least 15% at a minimum. Just get 15% at a minimum if you're a first-time home buyer, right? If you're a first-time home buyer, save up the money. It's worth it. Pay down the principal on the front end. It's worth it. I promise you, it's worth it. Now, I did want to highlight one thing. If you are a VA loan recipient, this includes you. I understand. I know. You're not required to put down a down payment on a VA loan. However, it is wise to do so. It is wise to do so to build equity faster, reduce home overall loan costs. Now, I know VA loans do not pay PMI, but they do have a funding fee that ranges between like 1.25% to 3.3%, somewhere in there. And depending on your down payment can change how much that funding fee is. Okay, I'm going to talk to one more set of VA loan people out there, because if you are a disabled veteran, you probably qualify to not have to pay a funding fee. Now, if you don't have a funding fee and there's no additional cost with the loan, paying off, kind of getting that money paid up front without any interest applied to the loan, no interest being able to accrue, there's still money saved. I'd have to run the numbers, see how much you're saving with that, but that one's a little iffy. If you don't have to pay a funding fee and there's no additional cost on your loan, maybe a 10% is good enough for a VA loan. But I would tell you, don't walk into a house with no money down. It's such a sales strategy. It is such a sales strategy. Just put some money down on the home, drive down some of that principal on the front end. Anyways, I won't dive in that. I'm talking to a small group right there. But if you have to pay a funding fee on your VA loan, you need to be getting up to the 15%, 20% as well. Okay. So the other thing check. You've got your down payment saved. Check. Now, the next question or the next piece you need to do is, how much house can you afford? That's kind of that next phase. How much house can I afford? Now, your monthly house payment should not exceed 25%, maybe 30% of your take-home pay. This ensures you have enough room in your budget for other financial goals. Like, you don't want your house to be your investment, right? You want it to be a investment. You don't want it to be the investment. Like, this is it. Like, my only investment is my house because I don't have any extra money. It's not what you want. But 25% to 30%, that includes your principal, your interest, your property tax, your homeowner's insurance, your PMI if applicable. Like, all of those things are included. I'll include this calculator as one of Dave Ramsey's calculators, but you just say, hey, very easily, just, hey, how much do I bring home every month? Let's just say you bring home $7,000 a month take home. So that's net. And you just hit calculate and it says, hey, if you put 15% down on your home budget is about $169,000. $1,750 is kind of that area. That's 25%. But $1,750 a month is kind of where you need to be at, right? Like, that's how this whole thing works. So keep that in mind. That's just a way to do it, but I'll put a link to that so that you can be ready. Okay, so debt-free, fully funded emergency fund, saved for the down payment, and figured out how much house you can afford. At that point, I would tell you, you need to be ready to cover closing costs, right? Like, those are that. Remember, closing costs is in addition to the down payment. Normally, closing costs is 3 to 4% of the home purchase price. So you need to be prepared to pay the closing costs. Most people walk in and be like, oh, I've got my 20% to put down. And then they're like, oh, and you have this closing cost. And now they're like, oh, that's 4%. Well, here I've got my 16% to put down because they didn't save up for their closing costs. So you need to be sure to include that. That includes your loan origination fees. That includes your home inspection, your appraisal, those type of things. All those things are your closing costs. Another thing to be on the lookout for is saving up for your moving expenses. You need moving supplies. If wherever you're living now, you need to possibly buy some new furniture if necessary. But make sure that you budget for those type of things so you're not caught off guard. But if you can go through all of those things, you're ready to buy a house. If you know for a fact you're debt free, you have a fully funded emergency fund, and you've saved for a down payment, you're like almost there. Like, you're knocking on the door, literally and figuratively. You need affordable monthly payments. So you figure out how much house you can afford. That requires no additional money. Like, it's just you going to figure out how much house you can afford. But then you do need to save for things like closing costs and moving expenses. Be prepared for those. Don't let those sneak up on you. And then the last question that I always like to bring up is, how long do you plan to stay there? How long do you plan to stay in this new home? Because I'll be honest, if you don't plan to live in that area for the next 5 years, at least 5 years, I don't know if it's worth buying a home. If I'm honest, 5 years, I don't know if it's worth buying a home, because you remember the closing costs we discussed earlier, just a little bit ago. You've got to pay those, right? That 3 to 4% of your home purchase price, you got to pay that. And you really get nothing back for it. Immediately you get nothing back for it. So if I bought the house for $400,000 and I paid 4% toward closing costs, and then I sold the house for $400,000, I'm out 4%, right? Like that is what I'm out. I'm out that money, and I will not get it back, right? So, you bought the $400,000 house, you spent the $16,000 in closing cost, and you sell the house for $400,000 in 2 years, you're out the $16,000 in closing costs, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, you need that house to appreciate. You need that house to appreciate. So if we go back to the example we talked about earlier, where we're like, in the next 5 years, if home prices go up 15%, maybe maybe that $400,000 house is worth $450,000 on the conservative side of that. Your $16,000 is covered, right? Because now you're going to sell the house for more than the closing costs, cost you. So that's kind of the way to think about that, is that you need to be there for more than how much it costs for those closing costs. You need your house to be worth what the closing costs cost you. So take that into account. If you have to plan to sell and repurchase, that needs to be taken into account too, because you're going to have closing costs on the new purchase, right? So maybe that $16,000 is now $32,000, and if your house is appreciated $50,000, then you can cover it, right? Like, you haven't come out of pocket anything. But don't bounce house to house. Just, it's better if you're not going to live there for 5 years. Like, it's better to rent. It really is. It really is better to rent. The closing costs are going to eat you alive. They're going to eat you alive. So if you've checked all those boxes, I want you to know that you should feel confident and ready to buy a home, right? But remember, buying a home isn't just about meeting this financial criteria. It's also about kind of being ready for that commitment, being ready to take care of that home. Because it's not super easy to just, it's not as easy as renting, right? Like, you can just say, all right, I'm moving out, and off you go, right? So don't rush into it. If I can leave you with one thing, I'd say don't rush into home ownership. Be patient. It's okay to rent. Like, there's a ton of good use cases for renting. Be patient. Make sure you're ready, because if you get into home ownership too soon, it will turn a complete blessing into a curse. It will turn the perfect dream into a nightmare. So be patient. Make sure you're ready. It's better to wait a little bit longer and keep renting a little bit longer than to buy a home when you're truly not ready. So hope you found this video useful. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more personal finance tips. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, or if there's a topic you want me to cover next. That's always stuff I'm looking for, is new topics that people are interested in. But all in all, I tell you, like, be okay being a renter. Be okay being a renter. There's a ton of use cases. There's a ton of value in sitting right there in that moment for a little bit longer than most people want to convince you that you need to sit there. But sit there a little longer and make sure that you're ready, because you will love home ownership when you're prepared for it. So thanks for tuning into this episode. I really hope you got something out of it. If you are ready to take control of your finances, and you're maybe stuck at those first couple steps, that getting out of debt, that saving for a down payment, the getting your fully funded emergency fund, all of those things, or just making sure that you're on the right track toward your financial goals, head over to thefinancialmirror.org and hit book now and schedule a free consultation with me. I do personal finance coaching. I'd love to make sure that we're getting you on a path to get you to where you want to be financially. If you do want to give an extra dose of support to the stream, head over to thefinancialmirror.org/shop. Pick you up some awesome financial mirror gear. Like I said, I truly appreciate everyone tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. All that goes a long way in getting this information out to more listeners. Till next week, continue improving the one thing you can control: yourself. Peace.
Well, that wraps up today's Financial Mirror. Join us next week as we continue to work on ourselves, change our mentality, and to commit to achieving the success we always envisioned. Regardless of your platform, help us grow as a community. Please like, subscribe, and share with the people in your lives.